and I've gone through the 6 tweets, the thread that you posted yesterday in terms of student athletes and tuition and scholarships. But for layman's terms, can you kind of break down exactly what you were trying to point out?
So I think one of the things that I'm trying to point out with this is just the idea that not all athletes are fully funded. Many athletes are paying tuition, room and board to attend the university. And so a sport like baseball has 11.7 scholarships that can be divided up among 27 counters. But if their roster includes more than that, then those are athletes or student athletes that are paying tuition or receiving some sort of other aid, whether that's need-based aid, academic-based aid, something else. So when a university chooses to cut and eliminate a high roster sport like a baseball or like a lacrosse, what they're really doing is cutting off access to a lot of tuition dollars, student fees that go to support things like campus recreation, the library, and other aspects of campus.
It's interesting, because Furman did it yesterday, but there's 8 schools who have cut programs since this COVID-19 thing has happened. No big Power Five school has done that yet, but do you see this as a trickle up effect that it might be something we might see if this continues?
I certainly see that the potential is there to cut more sports. I think that every athletic department in the country is going through a process of how can we eliminate expenses right now. And one of the ways that they can do that is being creative with travel and with conferences. So one of the challenges for Power Five schools is that geographically their conferences are so spread out, and the distance between West Virginia and Norman, Oklahoma is great. Much more so than the smaller schools. So when you see like a Bowling Green cutting a baseball, most of their conference rivals are in their same state. Most of them are in Ohio, some in Michigan, but the MAC is pretty centrally located, and so their travel expenses aren't quite as good, or aren't quite as high. So I think the potential's there. Power Five schools have the benefit of greater resources through television contracts and conference affiliation,
Mhm.
so they're a little less challenged, perhaps, than other smaller schools. And the other thing I would say too is a school like the University of Arkansas, this number of student athletes, 450, 475, whatever the number is a really small percentage of the overall student body. But
Mhm.
you take a school like Furman, which has just over 2,000 students, over 1,000 males, and they just cut 91 athletes yesterday in their 2 sports. That represents 1 out of every 11 male students on campus.
Mhm. It's interesting. These smaller schools, people don't think that they might not impact D1 schools, but D1 schools do schedule these smaller schools to play in non-conference, and also, prime example, Arkansas baseball picks up a grad transfer from Eastern Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky could easily be a school that could decide to cut their baseball program or whatever, and then they wouldn't be able to kind of reach into these smaller schools to bring up grad transfer. So there is an impact there.
Oh, absolutely. And, Furman plays some of their home baseball games at the I think it's a double A affiliate in Greenville, South Carolina. And I was looking back on their website yesterday when they played the University of South Carolina. They drew almost 3,400 spectators in what was a home game that went 12 innings. And it was in the middle of the week. And so clearly there's an interest there. And you do reach South Carolina fans that maybe aren't living in Columbia but are alums and they want to go to that. Now they won't have that opportunity.
You've been around sports for a long time, the Olympics included. What have you seen, in your professional opinion, just the biggest impact that COVID-19 has taken?
I don't know that we've seen the biggest impact yet. I think we'll have to look back in history, 5, 10 years down the road and see how things have changed. But I think what it really has done is the COVID-19 situation has opened up the possibility of reimagining how sports are delivered in this country. Um, and really, what is the interrelatedness, perhaps, of the Olympic movement, of college athletics, of high school sport? How athletes ascend to that position of being an elite athlete? And I truly think that we are going to look back and say that this is very different. Maybe it's going to be a case where universities only sponsor 5 or 6 sports. Maybe it's a case where the Power Five schools break away from the NCAA and form a different association. D2 and D3 schools have been looking at sports as a way to grow their student enrollment for a long time. A place like Hendrix College has a number of their students participating in sports, and that's a way that they can increase their enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger schools don't have that same challenge.
Mm-hmm. You have a lot of these student athletes in your classes. What's that been like? I know they've got a lot going on because their seasons have been canceled, or their fall practices or spring practices have been canceled. What is maybe some of the feelings you're getting from some of your students who are student athletes?
Yeah, unfortunately, Alyssa, I'm not teaching as much, so I don't know
Yeah.
that I really can speak to that. I only had one class with 8 students that
Mm-hmm.
Olympic honors for them. I did have one student athlete that was in that class. She's on the track team, and she was struggling trying to balance the new realities of what it would be like to try and train on her own, be at home,
Mm-hmm.
have their identity as an athlete taken away from them just very abruptly. But also at the same time, still trying to maintain focus on finishing up their academics.
Mm-hmm.
Much in the same way that any high school athlete that participated in the spring sport just had their identity taken away. There was that kind of mental challenge of, okay, I'm not an athlete anymore, but I still got to be a student. And I think it's a big adjustment. I think we'll see challenges from a mental health standpoint for some of these folks as their seasons, are gone away, and they're never able to recreate that last semester or that last senior year of sports.
And from your perspective, I'm curious, they're going to decide whether or not to bring back students Arkansas, and then they're going to decide whether or not to bring back student athletes and play sports, and what playing sports is going to look like in the fall. Do you even see a scenario where the student athletes aren't going to be able to be in classes with normal students because they are out there traveling back and forth to play competition? Could that be a scenario?
I think you'll see all students interact in classes. I know that the university has said, and the chancellor said, that that's our intention, is to be in face-to-face classes, and a number of different scenarios are being worked through as to how that might look. Maybe different sections, different sizes, spacing of things, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where student athletes are going to be accommodated any differently than the regular student body.
All right, I have one more question for you. Again, your personal opinion. A lot of people have said that this online way of taking classes that a lot of these students have had to go to right now could lower attendance, and could lower student bodies. Do you see that happening?
Well, sure. I think it's a challenge to all universities to figure out how to add value and create a situation where the in-person traditional college model is more valuable and than an online delivery system. And so, yeah, I think every university in the country wrestles with how this new dynamic, and the fact that we've shown that we can teach online and that students can learn, and so forth. So I think it really boils down to the experiences then that students have when they are on campus, and part of that experience is participating as an athlete. And they want to continue that identity, and they can't do that really if they're in an online delivery system.